webinar in the series. I'm glad you've decided to join me this morning. My apologies for the husky voice. It's a contentious topic, as you can see, and I'll do my best to ensure that I give you lots of value and to ensure that we have some fun with the topic. So the full title, Why CRM Sucks, a practical guide to the automation of sales and marketing. So this webinar is part theory and part practice, and where the practice is concerned, I'm going to give you some really practical insights into how you can and should perhaps use technology to automate the sales and marketing functions. So let's get started. So why the title, CRM Sucks? Well, one of the reasons is that it just so happens that this phrase is a frequently sorted phrase on Google. Why is that? I think because CRM sucks is a common refrain from salespeople and perhaps even times from management. And there's a reason for that. If we look at the promises made for or on behalf of CRM and compare them with the results, it's fairly easy to see there's quite a discontinuity. So let's look at some of the promises that are made for CRM, or the expectations that people have of CRM when they install it. We expect it to increase salespeople's productivity. Does it? Well, there's no evidence of that. In fact, there is, in most cases, most organizations we've worked with, evidence of the contrary. It seems to increase the load on, particularly the administrative load on salespeople. There's an expectation that it will improve customer service quality, but I'm yet to see any concrete evidence of improvements in customer service quality that can't be attributed back to operational improvements. There's an expectation that it will better integrate the organization, and in particular sales and marketing, but I don't see any evidence of less conflict between sales and marketing departments now than we saw prior to the uptake of CRM. And there's an expectation that CRM will equip management with the intelligence that they need to make better decisions. And certainly CRM has provided managers all over the world with significantly more data than they had before. But in most cases, if you ask a manager, how much trust do you have in the quality of the data or the information provided to you by CRM, you're more likely to get embarrassed laughter than any degree of enthusiasm in the reply. So I think it's not unfair to claim that CRM is underperforming on all counts, but it's probably premature for us to give up on CRM, and the reality is that most of us aren't giving up on CRM, the faithful soldier on. Technology companies, of course, are building more elaborate applications year on year, and their clients are investing more and more on the purchase of licenses and the implementation of CRM. So in spite of the carnage, in spite of the enormous cost and the almost complete failure to deliver on the promises of CRM, the reputation of CRM is untarnished, amazingly. Interestingly, ERP, the big brother of CRM, and I'll use the term ERP a lot, that refers to the class of enterprise applications of which CRM is one. And ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. So there's a set of enterprise applications that are designed to coordinate the organization as a whole. CRM is one of them. Now, the interesting thing about ERP is that for the most part, ERP has, you can think about operations systems, have increased significantly the productivity of organizations. But ERP, think particularly of the large ones like SAP, tends to have a fairly bad rap. CRM has done very little to increase the productivity of organizations, but as I say here, the reputation is relatively untarnished. I hope that this webinar will point you towards some of the reasons why. So a few things, just an insight into what I want to cover here. Number one, I want to talk about why the promise of CRM is still relevant in spite of the underperformance to date. I want to talk about what's preventing a typical sales function, or more particularly the standard sales function, from exploiting the power of CRM, and what you need to do to fix the fatal flaw in the design of sales that A, is handicapping the performance of sales, and B, that is preventing you from exploiting the power of CRM. And then once I've given you a path to actually exploit some value from CRM, I want to talk about sales and marketing technologies in general and provide you with a practical guide to the usage of them, and I'll punctuate that last point by giving you a quick tour of how we, and for the most part our clients, use CRM and other technologies to automate sales and marketing. And I'm going to talk in terms of specifics. So I won't just talk about the classes of application, I'll talk about the specific applications that we are using and that our clients are using. Okay, so let's get started. So I want to start by talking about the technology in general. CRM, for those of you who don't know, stands for Customer Relationship Management. It's a fairly meaningless title. CRM applications used to be called Salesforce Automation. I think probably a more accurate title would be Sales and Marketing Automation, but that's kind of a mouthful. So a nice lens through which to view all technology in the enterprise environment, and perhaps other environments, is 5 questions that were asked by Ellie Goldratt. Now, as most of you know, Ellie wrote the book The Goal, which is probably one of the best-selling business books ever. But in a lesser-known publication of his, in fact, I think it was an audio program, I came across a set of questions that he was using to address the power of technology. And the more I look at these questions, the more brilliant I realize that they are. And it's a nice lens, as I said, through which to view CRM. So here are the questions. Number 1, what's the power of the technology? Number 2, what limitation does the technology diminish? In other words, what does it do? Number 3, what business rules exist to accommodate that limitation currently? Number 4, what rules should exist in the future, given the capability of the technology to eliminate that limitation? And number 5, what changes to the technology are necessary to accommodate the new set of rules that needs to be put in place once the old limitations are eliminated? So that sounds like a mouthful, but let's walk through them one at a time. So the first question is, what's the power of the technology? So as I said before, CRM is a subset of a larger class of technology called enterprise resource planning. And as is the case with all ERP applications, the power of CRM is its ability to handle large volumes of data and to make that data accessible to different people in different locations, even to customers. So where sales is concerned, where CRM is concerned, CRM enables multiple parties to participate in customer transactions, including the customer, him or herself. And it also allows the automation of promotional activities, which is less significant, which is less of a strategic concern, but quite significant when you consider that particularly nowadays, promotional activities tend to be very labor intensive. Number 2, the second question is, what limitation does the technology diminish? Now, this is the question that isn't asked enough, and it really should be asked more often. It's one thing to know the general power of the technology, but it's another thing to know, well, what limitation or constraint are we actually expecting to address in the deployment of this technology? Well, traditionally, without access to data, what has happened in sales environments is customers have interacted with as few individuals as possible in your organization. In many cases, organizations go to an enormous amount of trouble to limit the access of customers because there's an implicit, if not an explicit, awareness that the more individuals that your customers interact with within your organization, the greater the opportunity for what tend to be called communication problems. So traditionally, without access to data across the organization, we have encouraged customers to interact with as few customers, as few people as possible. And the other couple of consequences is that marketing has really had no choice but to operate in a vacuum. So marketing has been prevented as a consequence from really getting engaged in the generation of sales opportunities or getting engaged in sales at all. So marketing has really focused on branding. In other words, playing with the public perception of your products and services from a distance. It hasn't been possible for them to roll up their sleeves and get involved. And the third limitation is that management has had no choice but to operate sales as a black box. The reason management operates sales as a black box is that management, and I'm talking about sales management, can't really see exactly what salespeople are doing. They don't have access to or a view of the They don't have a view of the activities that are being performed by salespeople in their endeavor to prosecute opportunities. So management has no choice but to treat sales as a black box. And by a black box, I mean inputs and outputs with a bunch of stuff that's unseen in the middle. As a consequence of that, management has no choice but to simply focus on inputs and outputs and to leave salespeople to operate in the middle autonomously. So the next question is, well, what business rules exist to accommodate this limitation historically? Remembering, of course, that we're about to remove the limitation. And the first rule is that the salesperson is an autonomous agent or operates as an autonomous agent. And the second is that the customer owns that the salesperson owns the customer relationship. And both of these rules are a consequence of it being necessary to funnel all customer interaction through the one individual. So the more interesting question is, well, given the power and the capability of the technology, what rules should exist in future? Well, if the technology allows multiple people in your organization to communicate with customers and to have at their fingertips all of the necessary information that is required to enable your organization to participate in a single conversation as opposed to multiple disjointed conversations, all of a sudden it becomes possible to envisage and ultimately to build an environment where your customers interact with a series of specialists, or probably what's more likely is a series of specialists customer side interact with a series of specialists on your side of the fence. So what we're proposing here is not a number of conversations, but one conversation between you and your customer, but multiple parties involved in that conversation. Now that's a powerful transition, and interestingly, it's a transition that customers want. It's a mistake to think that because customers claim they want a single point of contact, that what they actually want is a single point of contact. The reality is they don't. Particularly in complex sales environments, what you will discover, if you look carefully, is clients go to enormous trouble if they're expected to deal with just a single a single person, to hunt down other specialists and interact directly with those specialists. For example, if there's design involved in the product that you're... By the way, if you are having bandwidth problems, my apologies, close down whatever applications you can. The bandwidth problems are the downlink. The uplink speed is fine. If for some reason you just can't watch, my apologies, but I will be sending you a link to a recording of this webinar afterwards, and the quality in the recording will be perfect. I can guarantee that. So again, my apologies. So it is true that customers ask to deal with a single individual, but what customers are really looking for is a single conversation. Given the choice, they're quite happy. In fact, they would prefer to talk to specialists. So in the design phase of an engagement, your customer would rather that your engineers talk to their engineers than a situation where their engineers have to talk to your salesperson, who then tries to communicate back and forth between your client and your engineering team. So other rules. Customers should have one conversation. Sales and marketing should be tightly integrated. And what that means is that marketing should step up and take responsibility, take more responsibility for what's happening in sales. And the change that we would like to see occur is that we would like to see marketing take responsibility for the generation of sales opportunities, not just for the polishing of the brand, whatever that means. And the last change is that management should manage the sales function rather than managing people. So sales is really the last bastion where management is concerned. We haven't seen scientific management applied to the sales function as we have the rest of the organization. Remembering, of course, that scientific management was a concept that became popular at the turn of the last century. And of course, the reason it isn't possible for management to manage the sales function scientifically is because they have neither the information nor the control that's required to do that. So that needs to change. So we're imagining a brave new environment here, and those of you who've read The Machine, or at least the first 3 chapters of The Machine, have a good idea of what that environment looks like. If you haven't, I will send you a link so that you can download the first few chapters and read them. It's important that you do, but don't despair. If you missed the previous webinar or haven't read any of our materials, in a minute I'm going to show you a model of the sales process design that we advocate and talk about the technology implications, so all this will become clearer. In summary, though, before we do that, what changes are required to the technology to accommodate the new environment that the new technology in fact makes possible? Number one, the CRM should be designed to be a sales operations tool, not a salesperson's productivity tool. In the environments that we build, we are not interested in salespeople playing in the CRM. It's not their tool. What we're interested in salespeople doing is spending their time in the field face-to-face with potential customers. Our belief is that CRM is critical, but that it's critical for what we call sales operations. In other words, a team of people back in head office sitting behind the salespeople. Number two, CRM should be configured to give management and marketing exhaustive data. Now, CRM tends to be very weak when it comes to reporting because most organizations view it as a salesperson's productivity tool, and because the data quality in CRM is incredibly poor. So it doesn't make sense for the CRM providers to invest a lot of money in reporting. Now, some of the CRMs have very good-looking reports, but interestingly, none of the CRMs, not a single one of them on the marketplace, captures all of the data that's required to provide management with the information that it needs to manage scientifically. And if you don't know what I'm referring to there, consider this. Which CRM enables you to enter for a given salesperson that salesperson's capacity? The scary fact is that all CRMs are designed based upon an assumption, an implicit one, that salespeople have infinite capacity. And if you doubt me, go to the CRM and create a task for the salesperson, and then create another task, and another task, and another task, and keep doing that until the CRM tells you to stop creating tasks because the salesperson has run out of capacity. What you'll discover is that will never occur. Now, that's not a problem if salespeople aren't busy, but for the most part, salespeople are busy. And it doesn't make sense for management to attempt to manage a finite capacity environment as if it were an infinite capacity one. Okay, so before we talk about the sales model that we advocate, let's summarize on what we've extracted from Ellie's 5 questions. So in the traditional sales environment, CRM is not actually needed. In a traditional sales environment where salespeople operate autonomously, they simply don't need a CRM. As a productivity tool, a CRM isn't that useful. And the reason for that is that if we're talking about field salespeople here, field salespeople are hopefully in the field, driving around in a company car, visiting with customers, having conversations. You don't require a CRM to do any of those things. Traditionally, salespeople used to operate with Filofax systems, calendars or day planners, whatever they're called. And from a salesperson's perspective, that is the perfect tool. It doesn't have to be switched on, and it does a good enough job of maintaining the data that's required. We need to remember that unlike accounting or finance environments, opportunity data atrophies very quickly. It's important for you to know next week or next month what conversation you had with a contact at a particular organization. But in 6 months or a year's time, that information becomes valueless. Now, the same, of course, doesn't apply to a transaction in a financial or operational context. There are numerous problems with a sales function, numerous problems, but the reality is that the CRM doesn't address any of them. The problem is not with the technology, the problem's with the design of the sales function. So I'm suggesting a new approach to the design of the sales function, and in that new reimagined environment, we discover that CRM becomes critical. We also discover that the technology as a whole, not just CRM, must be designed to support multifunctional workflows. So it has to enable individuals from different departments to work together to prosecute opportunities and to manage accounts. And as a consequence of that, we discover that CRM is one component of a broader technology solution that incorporates ERP, for that matter, and that's one thing that's commonly neglected, particularly by CRM providers. So let's start, that's the theory over and done with. Let's start talking about some specifics. So I've swiped this image here from the previous webinar in the series, and the previous webinar was called the Death of Field Sales. In that webinar, I was espousing what I call an inside-out approach to sales. So this is almost a thought experiment where we pretend that we don't have a sales function at all, and we design a brand new sales function from scratch. And in that webinar, I was talking about how in that environment it makes sense to start inside as opposed to outside. It doesn't make sense to start by recruiting a bunch of external salespeople. It makes a lot more sense to, number one, fortify customer service. Because for the most part, the greater volume of customer transactions are or should be handled by customer service, and customer service teams in most organizations we encounter are woefully equipped. And what that leads to is salespeople becoming overburdened with customer service responsibility. So step number one is to fortify customer service. Step number two is to build an inside sales team, not a field sales team, but an inside sales team, because it's shocking how many selling activities can actually be performed on the telephone, and more importantly, how many activities can actually be performed more effectively on the telephone than they can be in the field. And that's not even considering the fact that inside salespeople cost probably 60% of what field salespeople do and are probably 5 to 10, or definitely 5 to 10 times more productive in terms of meaningful contacts per day. The next thing that we build here, I should point to what I'm talking to, is a promotions function. And in this new environment that we're imagining here together, the promotions function is not just responsible for polishing the brand. In fact, they're not responsible for that at all. The promotions function is responsible for generating sales opportunities. Opportunities for the inside sales functions and opportunities for the last component of the model, which is field sales. Now, when we come to field sales consists of two parts. There's the field salesperson, and then there's the field salesperson's executive assistant, or sales coordinator, as we tend to call them. So the way this works is that we recognize that even a capable field salesperson who focuses primarily on business development still ends up having to spend a percentage of their time working inside, whether that means sitting in a home office, or whether it means sitting in the car park of a McDonald's, making calls and responding to emails when they, of course, would rather be face-to-face selling. So whenever we deal with field sales, in addition to stripping away the responsibility for customer service, promotions, and the prosecution of minor transactions, what we do is split the field sales function in half, and we pair salespeople up with internal coordinators. So the role of the internal coordinator is to take responsibility for all of the activities associated with the prosecution of sales opportunities that can be performed internally. As a consequence of all that, we end up with a field team that contains a fraction of the number of team members than you would find in a typical sales environment, doing a significantly higher volume of appointments. So if you look at our clients' businesses, a typical client would have 1/5 the sales team in terms of headcount, but that sales team collectively would do twice the volume of business development appointments that the entire team in a traditional sales environment would perform. Okay, so that's the model. And after this webinar, I will send you an email, and in the email there'll be a link back to the Death of Field Sales webinar if you want to go back and watch that, or watch it again. So let's talk now about the technology implications. So what I'm going to refer to here for the next few slides is workflows. You can think of the organization as a workflow as a whole. You know, at the very highest level, the organization consists, the way I like to think of it, as a pump to convert raw materials into units of gross profit. But then, of course, when you look at that workflow closely, you discover that that major workflow breaks down into a whole bunch of smaller workflows. So let's talk about the workflows that each of these functions within the re-envisaged sales environment is responsible for. So customer service. In a typical sales environment that we would build, customer service was responsible for quotes. Simple quotes, not those quotes that require engineering input. Although even where engineering input is required, parenthetically, what we would do is have engineering provide the necessary inputs and customer service still generate the final quote. So customer service, one of their workflows is converting RFQs, request for quotes, into quotations. Another workflow is the processing of orders. So taking purchasing orders and entering them into the system. In a lot of cases, customer service also performs a low-level job management function in that they will monitor the progress of the order through the system, particularly if there are multiple participants involved in that. For example, if you have a production function followed by installation that perhaps might be done by external contractors, we will generally have customer service track the job from order entry right the way through to final fulfillment. And customer service is also responsible for issues. So if a customer opens a box and discovers there's a missing part in their order, we don't want them ringing a salesperson, we want them ringing customer service. So we want customer service to own these three workflows: the generation of quotes, the processing of orders, and the management of issues. And when I say own, we want them to absolutely own these issues. And what that means is if they own them, no one else in the organization can. So it requires some discipline. Salespeople cannot take ownership of a customer service issue because what they need to do is pass it off to customer service and let customer service manage it from start to finish. Customer service quality ends up being improved as a consequence. Okay, so they're the three critical workflows: quotes, orders, and issues. Let's talk now about inside sales. Inside sales is a lot simpler. Inside sales is responsible for sales opportunities and quotes. Now, where quotes is concerned, in some cases there are certain types of quotes that it makes sense for inside sales to do. Now, the way we draw the division is whether or not technical knowledge is required. If there is zero technical knowledge required to generate a quote, then we would have inside sales do it. So, for example, if a quote consists of entering a whole bunch of part numbers and some contextual knowledge is required to ensure that a client, for example, isn't ordering a series of parts that don't work well together, then customer service should generate that quote. If, however, the only customization being performed to a quote is the addition of the correct name and address of the customer, then it's quite fine for inside sales to do that. But the major workflow that inside sales is concerned with is opportunity management. So converting a potential sale into an actual sale, or attempting to at least. The next function is promotions. Promotions is primarily concerned with campaigns. The purpose of campaigns is to generate sales opportunities. So the way that a campaign works is we start with a list in most cases. We run a campaign of some kind, and we end up with a number of interested parties. Those interested parties are converted into sales opportunities and released in batches to either inside sales or field sales. And that whole workflow that I've just described is, or at least should be, the responsibility of promotions. Next, we have field sales, and field sales breaks into two parts. There's the sales coordinator, who is responsible for sales opportunities and tasks. Okay, so the sales coordinator's role is very similar to the inside salesperson's role. Let's consider the field salesperson's role. The field salesperson's role consists only of performing activities that have been scheduled for him or her by the sales coordinator. So I'm not intending to talk too much about technology on this slide, but straight away that we can see that the technology implications of that statement are that really the salesperson needs access only to a calendar, because the sales coordinator is managing opportunities and serving up to the salesperson activities already scheduled, ready for the salesperson to perform. Now, of course, the salesperson needs some context. When the salesperson goes and performs an appointment, the salesperson needs to know, well, what's the backstory here, or what's the industry, what communications have occurred previously. And the way that that's achieved is the sales coordinator, when creating a calendar appointment for the salesperson, enters that contextual information so that the salesperson can pull up out front of the potential customer's premise, sit in their car and read up on the file notes in the appointment, and then grab his iPad or briefcase, whatever the case is, and head up the driveway. And in fact, that's exactly how I work out there in the field. And let me tell you, it's a very pleasant method of operation. So they're the major workflows. What I want to do now is to zero in on the technology by looking at the interaction between those workflows and by looking at the life cycle of a sales opportunity so that we can see the flow of work through the system. And that's going to lead us to a discussion of the classes of technology and the specific software applications that are required to make this whole high-level workflow work. So let's assume that we're starting with with a marketplace, and we want to acquire ourselves a new client. Nowadays, what's most likely to happen is that we're most likely to attract a new client either from our website or our blog or from the greater internet, increasingly using SEO, pay-per-click, or some sort of social activity. By the way, don't get fooled by all the fuss over social. For most of you, particularly if you're B2B, you will find that pay-per-click is still the primary, should be the primary or the most effective method for generating sales opportunities. Now, in both these cases, what we're looking to do is to route responses to landing pages. So for tracking purposes, increasingly we're less likely to have forms embedded in websites. What we're likely to do is to have discrete landing pages. And the reason we want to do that is that we want to make sure that at the time a potential customer goes to a location and completes a form, and in so doing generates a sales opportunity for us, we want to be able to track exactly how they got to be there, and we want to make sure that we're capturing the necessary information. So generally what happens is we end up with a set of landing pages that potential customers are directed to, either from your website or from your blog, or from the greater internet via pay-per-click or SEO activities. Now, once people have landed on that page, the expectation is they'll complete a form. They complete a form, they provide their information, in most cases in very poor form, small letters for company names and lots of misspelling and so on. And there's a process there, that data needs to be viewed and cleaned up and deduped against your internal address list and so on. But also, in many occasions, there needs to be some sort of preliminary management performed. So in most cases, our clients would use some sort of autoresponder sequence. So let me give you an example of of what I mean here. On my blog, salesprocessengineering.net, you can go and subscribe to receive regular emails in your inbox each time I post to the blog, and a lot of people do that every day. When you do that, you'll receive an email straight away encouraging you to request a physical copy of the first 3 chapters of my book. And if you don't respond to that, you'll get another email in a week and another email in a week, and that will continue for about 6 weeks, after which the emails will stop. The last email will say, hey, this is your last chance, we're not going to remind you anymore. Now, something like 96%, give or take, accurate to the nearest tenth of a point, but about 96%, or actually exactly 96% of people who receive those emails, that email sequence, go ahead and request a copy of the physical book. Okay, so that's an example of an autoresponder sequence, and designed well, that they can be extremely effective. So that little process there we referred to as lead management. At the end of that process, we're going to take leads and we're going to transfer them into our address book. Now, the address book, we all know, lives within the CRM. Okay, the address book is a list of accounts and contacts. And of course, we're entering these accounts and contacts into our database for good reason. And the reason is, of course, we want to sell them stuff. So in most cases, as inquiries come in, those inquiries are converted to sales opportunities. Now, as you know, no doubt, we're not big fans of qualification. We think that it makes sense to design the promotional activities such that parties who are reasonably interested and who are there for opportunities respond. And then if somebody's prepared to talk to a salesperson, we'll send a salesperson out there to talk to them. So we convert those inquiries into sales opportunities. And the sales opportunities, you can see that the opportunity itself is a workflow, and there are other little workflows associated with that. There's the generation of quotation, there's the performance of appointments, and ultimately there's the fulfillment of orders. Now, the yellow here is representing the operational side of the organization. So we have quotations here, we have issues and job management, and we have procurement and so on. So this is the path of a prospect, or the path of the prospect's data through the organization. A meta workflow here is reporting. So on top of all this, we have management. And management's interest is to interrogate all of the data that accumulates as a result of these little workflows, and to generate reports, and to use those reports to manage the team and to make business decisions. Okay, so what I want to do in a minute is I've talked to you about workflows, and we can think about each of these squares as being a little workflow. I want to talk to you about the specific technology that's used to manage each of those workflows. But before I do that, I have an ad break. Now, it's an ad break with a difference. As you know, there's a no pitch guarantee for this webinar. So how am I getting away with an ad break? Well, the thing is, I want to offer you 40 minutes of my time to spend working through this stuff. I'll explain what we do with the 40 minutes in a minute. But the reason I'm calling it a no pitch is that I have no intention whatsoever of attempting to sell you something in the 40 minutes. And as you'll see when we go through the agenda, I simply won't have time to do it. So think of it as a gift. It's a gift, it's not a pitch. If as a result of this 40-minute, what we call a best practice briefing, you decide that you'd like to inquire into the services that we provide at Ballistics, you're more than welcome to do it. But believe me, we're not going to initiate the conversation. So here's the offer. We set aside 40 minutes. Prior to that, you read the first 5 chapters of The Machine. You've probably read the first 3 chapters already, but if you haven't, I'll give you a link to do that after this event. And the next 2 chapters you can find on my blog. I hope that you enjoy the first 5 chapters so much that you go ahead and read the rest. I think there are about 9 chapters sitting there now. I'm posting new chapters as I complete them. So when the call starts, what we're going to do on the call is review a typical day in the life of a salesperson. And if you have other people in your sales environment, for example, inside sales, customer service, we may well review a typical day in their lives also. The reason we take that approach is it's a very neat trick for developing an understanding of the way that your environment functions. After we've done that, we'll have a discussion of your sales structure, the structure of your sales function, and the technology that you're using to power it or to automate it. As a result of that conversation, I think it's highly likely that we're going to happen across some easy wins. So if I can spot some simple tips that I can give you to produce an immediate improvement in performance, often there's tips like, for example, not having salespeople generate opportunities, generating them for them. It's a very small change that you can make, but the implications where the quality of management data is concerned and your ability to manage is enormous. And the last thing that we'll do is talk a little about a longer-term approach to process improvement. In other words, the thought experiment idea. If you could start with a clean sheet of paper and design and build your sales function from scratch, how exactly would it look? So we'll have to work hard to fit all that into 40 minutes, but I promise we'll do our best and make it a productive conversation. If you're interested in this, I'm going to leave this slide here up on the screen for about 10 seconds. If you're interested in this, please click the yes button on this slide now. I'm going to leave this slide up here for about another 6 or 7 seconds, and then I'll take it away. I will put it back at the end of the webinar. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's move on. As I said, I'll put it back at the end. So now it's time to talk about the specific technologies, both the classes of technology and the actual applications. And I'm going to expand this slide so it's a little easier to see. Okay. Okay, so what technology are you going to use to power each of these workflows? We'll start with the website and the blog. That's easy. So generally speaking, nowadays, it makes a lot of sense to build websites and to build blogs using what's called content management systems, rather than building them using discrete HTML. The reason for that is it enables organizations to edit their websites and their blogs themselves. And that's critical because agility is so important, and I'm sure I'll mention that word again. Where technology as a whole is concerned, agility is critically important. And the reason for that is that technology is meant to empower your business processes. And in so many cases, when we work with organizations, we discover that their business processes are impeded by technology. Or more importantly, impeded by the lack of agility where their technology is concerned. Their technology simply can't change fast enough to keep up with the necessary changes that are occurring in their organization. So because agility is so important, it's important that you build a website using a content management system, which basically means the content sits in a database rather than being hard-coded into the pages, which means that anyone can log in and change it with the appropriate permissions. Now that sounds complicated and expensive, but here's an interesting point. As far as I'm concerned, the best, most appropriate content management system for a typical website or blog on the market is called WordPress. Now, the cost of WordPress is nothing. And by nothing, I mean zero. The reason it's nothing is that WordPress is an open source application. It was developed by the open source community under the open source license, and as a consequence, it costs nothing. Now, it has to be hosted somewhere, but you can purchase WordPress hosting for $5 a month, or you can have your IT department spend $500, bolt a Linux server into your server room, download Linux and Apache and all the other bits and pieces, which cost nothing also, because they're also open source, and you can run up WordPress. Most of the professional blogs and websites that you see, including some very impressive high-traffic ones like TechCrunch, for example, are built on WordPress. So cost is not. I remember I used to personally code discrete websites using discrete HTML at the time at which the internet first appeared. And at that point, I remember, or shortly after that point, I remember Microsoft talking about a content management system that was really designed for enterprise. And it cost tens of thousands of dollars to purchase that content management system. I guarantee it wasn't a patch on WordPress, which costs nothing. Okay. Now, landing pages. You can see that I've divided that workflow into two colors. Landing pages tend to be a collaborative effort between your content management system, WordPress, for example. By the way, there are alternatives to WordPress. If you want to spend money for some strange reason, Squarespace is not a bad option. There's an argument that the likes of Squarespace enable complete novices to build good-looking websites, and I think there's probably some value to that argument. The likes of Squarespace aren't as powerful as WordPress, but if you don't have access to design capabilities, then it might make more sense. But again, we're talking a relatively small investment. So where landing pages is concerned, it's a collaborative effort. Generally speaking, the page is served up using your content management system, but the form within the page is provided using a lead management system. Okay, so that leads us to a discussion of lead management systems. In most cases, you don't want to transfer form responses directly into your CRM. Even though it's possible, in most cases it isn't desirable. And the main reason for that is that CRMs, while some of them have the ability to generate forms and to have autoresponder sequences and so on, they simply don't do it as well as the dedicated lead management systems. So our preference is to use a lead management system. You could think Aweber or MailChimp, and there are probably others as well. I think iContact probably has some of these functionalities. Aweber is the one that's used by most of the people in the know, and there's a good reason for that. The reason is that unlike any of the others, including MailChimp, Aweber has the ability for you to some extent, automate workflows. So if you were to go to our website and subscribe to a feed in your inbox of our blog posts, and as a result of one of the emails in the autoresponder sequence, you went ahead and requested a copy of the machine, Aweber would automatically unsubscribe you from that sequence so that you wouldn't keep getting bugged with superfluous emails, which is a valuable feature. Now, the next step is to take the data from Aweber and to import it into CRM. In order to import it into CRM, the data in most cases needs to be cleaned up, and more importantly, it needs to be deduped against your existing house list. Because what you will find oftentimes, more often than not, is that if somebody is interested in your services, they will click on multiple forms and will initiate multiple contacts with your organization. So it's not uncommon, and we find this a lot. You know, if someone's interested in engaging with us, oftentimes there are 3 or 4 people from an organization, sometimes significantly more, who have completed numerous forms requesting different things. So all of that needs to be cleaned up, because the last thing you want is to generate multiple opportunities, as particularly if those opportunities are going to be prosecuted by different salespeople. Okay, so the data gets imported into CRM. So these boxes here, the blue ones, the light blue ones, represent CRM. So CRM is really a bundle of workflows. A CRM contains an address book, it contains the campaign management module, it contains a calendar module, it contains an issue management module, and in most cases CRMs contain a whole bunch of other modules that you probably won't use that much. So these ones here are the main ones. So the CRM is a big piece of technology that consists of a bundle of modules that line up with each of these workflows here. Calendaring, provides appointments. The campaign management workflow is what's used to run campaigns to your address book. We have a line back here to lead management, because in many cases you will use the same lead management tool that you use to receive inbound responses to handle the broadcast email back to your house list. Even though CRMs have the ability to do broadcast email, if you have a large list, in the thousands as opposed to the hundreds, the last thing that you want to do is be using your CRM to broadcast emails. And there are reasons for that you can ask me about when we chat. So the blue boxes are CRM. The yellow boxes are now what's called ERP. So this is your operational technology. So finance and accounting, and the shop floor type stuff, or distribution software. And this software is generally used for quotations, and it should be used for quotations. By the way, here's an aside. Because your CRM has the ability to generate quotes is not a good reason why they should be generated in CRM. As far as I'm concerned, the quotations are something that belong in ERP rather than CRM, and that is because there's a simple linear workflow that goes from a request for quote right the way through to an order, and it makes sense to have that entire workflow exist in the CRM than to have bits of it in ERP than to have bits of it in CRM. So generally speaking, we draw the line at opportunity management. We manage opportunities in CRM, but any quotes that are requested get generated in ERP. By the way, I didn't talk about CRM applications, and this is an important conversation. It is possible to spend a lot of money, enormous amounts of money on CRM, but it is absolutely not necessary. It is possible for you to purchase an enterprise quality CRM that has all of the features that the most expensive CRM that you could name, say Siebel, has, and to get it for absolutely nothing. Okay, so here are the three common and sensible choices where CRM is concerned: Salesforce, Microsoft CRM, and vTiger. We are big fans of vTiger for one simple reason. Its functionality is fit for purpose, okay, and it's free. And the reason it's free is, again, it's open source technology. Now, the fact that it's open source has additional benefits in addition to being just free. One of the benefits is it's very easy to find people, lots of people who are prepared to do customizations and development work. And the other reason is that because it's open source, it's very easy to program add-ons or plugins or modifications. Okay, so let's talk about these three choices. If you want the shiniest, most visually appealing, and probably most feature-rich CRM, Salesforce is the obvious choice. But Salesforce is extremely expensive. Now, if you're a four-man organization, perhaps not, particularly if the requirement for integration is minimal. But if you're a larger organization that's looking to integrate Salesforce with other applications, then you'll be shocked how expensive it turns out to be. You could look at spending more than $100 per user per month for Salesforce. So it's a beautiful application. It has an enormous amount of functionality, and it's really beautiful to look at. It's very aesthetically pleasing. Users love it. But you need to be prepared for the fact that it's expensive, and in most cases, needlessly so, because vTiger provides all of the useful functionality at no expense. Now, MS-CRM is a very good CRM. Out of the box, it does more than the other two do. I'm talking here about features that you're actually likely to use as opposed to bloatware. Microsoft CRM, I think, makes a lot of sense if you are a strong Microsoft environment. For example, if you're using SharePoint, if you're using one of the Dynamics ERPs, there is a lot of interoperability in the Microsoft environment that is worth paying a premium for. And in the scheme of things, Microsoft CRM is not particularly expensive. So they would be our three preferences. Personally, I don't think it's worth really considering any of the other CRMs. Okay. Now, ERP, we're not going to discuss this because it's not sales technology. And the range of applications there is enormous, everything from QuickBooks up to SAP. So we're talking hundreds of dollars up to millions of dollars. And my preference there, though, is have the same approach as you do where CRM is concerned. If you can buy an open source application, if you can load an open source application, go ahead and do that. Every application that you load will require some integration and probably some degree of customization at some point. I would rather, if I were you, save my money on software licenses and spend it on customization. Okay, and I'm going to come back and talk about why you shouldn't be having VARs, in other words, the people who sell the software doing the customization for you, in a minute. So the last piece is reporting. None of the CRMs and none of the ERPs are particularly strong when it comes to reporting, and that's simply because anyone who knows what they're doing isn't going to use the CRM or the ERP to do the reporting. They're going to use another dedicated reporting application. Now you have a whole bunch of choices here. The large companies use the likes of Cognos, but in smaller organizations, I think the two sensible choices are Excel. You know, I'm a huge fan of reporting in Excel. Now, by reporting in Excel, I don't mean entering data in Excel. I mean linking Excel to the databases, the ERP and the CRM databases, and using it purely to import data from other applications and generate reports, in particular pivot tables and pivot charts. You should never have your users entering data into Excel, but Excel is a fantastic tool to use for business intelligence if you have someone in your organization who knows how to use it. There are some other new and exciting reporting tools appearing on the market. One that I haven't looked at in detail, but that sounds exciting, is KPI Library. So this is a web service that goes and sucks data out of your enterprise applications on a regular basis and provides you with a very easy-to-use reporting platform. Now, increasingly, as you can see here, there's a movement, at least, you know, where this is what we're encouraging, away from expensive applications that are loaded on your server, and towards open source, and where open source isn't available, towards software as a service type applications where you pay a monthly fee. And I'll come back and talk about cost in a minute. So before I do that, here's a set of do's and don'ts. So this is from my experience doing this stuff over the last 20 years. Here's my, and you're willing to agree or disagree with some of these. Here's my general advice. Number one, and this is the most important one, if you're interested in this subject and you're not technology literate, you need to recognize that that's a problem and you need to fix that problem. If you don't have an understanding of technology, you are going to be led astray. There's no question of it. You know, when we go to the doctor, we place an enormous amount of faith in the doctor because really we know nothing about medicine. And as a consequence, it's impossible for us to evaluate, well, who's a good doctor and who's a bad doctor. Now, fortunately, the medical system has been designed so that to a certain extent it's self-correcting. Bad doctors just, for the most part, don't do well. And particularly nowadays with Yelp and so on, you can go and look at reviews, and there's wisdom of crowds to some extent. But where technology is concerned, it's impossible for us to evaluate technology vendors. And the average quality of technology vendors is poor, and the variation in capability is absolutely enormous. If we had the kind of variation in technologies, in capability in the medical profession, we'd have people dying all around us. So you must become technology literate. There's another reason for this, and that is that as time goes on, technology is playing a bigger and bigger role in the operational performance and even the sales and marketing performance of our organizations. You cannot afford not to be technology literate. So get technology literate, don't be a Luddite. Now, if you're not technology literate, here's a test. Do you know what an API is? Do you know what HTML stands for, or SMTP? Do you know the difference between a relational database and a flat table? If you can't answer those questions with confidence, you need to get technology literate. So here's some advice. My first piece of advice is start reading the technology press. So go and load up Google Reader and subscribe to TechCrunch and some of the Mashable, etc. More importantly, go and subscribe to Mixergy.com. Mixergy.com costs nothing. Andrew at Mixergy records an interview every single day with a successful technology startup, a founder of a tech company. Now, those interviews are valuable because they're entrepreneurial. You get to hear how individuals who've built organizations worth tens or sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars of companies have done it, so the stories are intriguing. But because Andrew tends to favor tech startups, what you end up doing almost by osmosis is learning a lot about technology painlessly. So go ahead and sign up to Mixergy.com. The other thing that you can do is get your hands dirty. If you have access on your computer. Or if you don't, go and look up Zoho Creator and design a little web application. You know, those applications are designed so that somebody with no technology experience can design something basic. And what you're going to discover is if you start playing with Access or with Zoho Creator and you build a simple database that does something, a simple web application that does something, inevitably what you're going to do is find yourself drawn into doing, you know, more and more things. You're going to end up learning how to write a little bit of code. You know, and before you know it, you'll start to understand technology when people are talking to you. And when somebody's recommending something stupid, you'll be able to smell a rat. My next piece of advice is avoid all-in-one solutions. If somebody's offering you a piece of technology that promises to automate your entire organization, everything from the management of social media through to the fulfillment of orders, then run, don't walk, run away. The reason for that is there is no such thing as an all-in-one solution that is best of breed in all of its modules. And I'm assuming here that you're not a major enterprise talking about the likes of SAP and so on. But in fact, even if you look at major enterprises, their technologies tend to be a hodgepodge of different things added together. My advice is buy best of breed and integrate. And I'll talk about integration in a second. So let's assume that you're, I'll pick a silly example. Let's assume that you're a dry cleaning business. Not there's anything wrong with dry cleaning. Odds are there are one or more technology providers that offer some kind of dry cleaning technology that automates your operations. And where operations is concerned, it probably does a jolly good job. Now, it's likely that that same technology will have a CRM add-in that they sell you. And their pitch for the add-in will be integration. Well, it's tightly integrated with the operational module, therefore you should buy the CRM. My advice is do not buy the CRM. And the reason you shouldn't buy the CRM is that most dry cleaners don't do a lot of sales, don't do a lot of marketing. And if you think about it, the vendor has designed the software to meet the requirements of the average vendor, which are almost non-existent. Okay? So the trick is to buy best of breed and integrate. So now let's talk about integration. And here it looks like we have a contradiction. I'm saying resist integration for integration's sake. So do minimal integration. And the reason for that is very simple. There are two types of integration. There are human integration, and there is programmatic integration. Novices assume that all of your enterprise applications should be integrated programmatically. The reality is, however, what makes more sense in most circumstances is for the workflows to be integrated, not for the technology to be integrated. So here's an example. Let's assume that we have a customer service person who is generating quotations. And as a consequence, that customer service person needs to have access to customer data and needs to have access to, or perhaps, here's a better example. The customer service person has to have access to opportunities in the CRM and also has to have access to the quoting module in the ERP. Conventional wisdom is we need to write some software to integrate the opportunity module in CRM with the quoting module in ERP, but nothing could be further from the truth. All you need is a customer service person who has two monitors. And what's going to happen here is the customer service person is going to have your CRM in one monitor and your ERP in another monitor. Or if they only have one monitor, they're going to alt-tab between the two applications. Because the reality is, even though the workflow spans two modules, the actual data that's shared is negligible. In other words, if there's one or two data elements that are in common between those two modules, it hardly makes sense to write an integration piece to integrate the two programmatically. And the reason for that is that integration programmatically tends to be difficult, and more often than not, what you end up doing is imposing a significant amount of drag. It takes a long time, it makes your organization less agile. Oftentimes you put strict business rules in place that slow operators down. So my advice is integrate workflows and do minimal programmatic integration. Most of our clients would synchronize the address book between their ERP and their CRM, and that's all the integration they would possibly do. The exception to that is if you're a e-commerce provider and it's necessary for your clients to see inventory levels on your website. But that's a whole different story, and we don't have time to go into that today. Next is develop some in-house technology expertise. Next is don't place too much faith in bars. And to my mind, too much faith is pretty much any faith. So VAR stands for value-added resellers. All the CRM companies have VARs who sell their software and who do the necessary customizations, and for the most part do an enormous amount of unnecessary customizations. Whenever we engage with an organization, we go and customize their CRM. That's what we call it. The reality is, however, in most cases, we're putting the CRM back the way that it came out of the box. Or in the case of Salesforce, we're simply restoring it so that it looks the way that Salesforce looks when you first register for the service. Most of the customizations that the software vendors are doing are completely unnecessary, because what they're doing is they're planning bad business practices into a relatively well-designed software application. In most cases, it makes more sense to modify the organization to fit the software than it does to modify the software to fit the organization. The other problem with VARs is they are expensive and they're slow. I talked before about how agility is important, and that leads us to the next point. VARs are not a substitute for in-house technology expertise. If you want your technology to be agile enough to enable your business as opposed to slow it down, you have to have internal expertise. My general advice then is save money on software, load open source whenever you possibly can, and spend the money on services instead. And I'll give you a practical example of how we do that at Ballistics in just a second. So, well, let's do that now. So here's a couple of slides, and I'm just about done here. And this will show you how we use technology at Ballistics. And this actually follows the workflow that I showed you previously, the high-level workflow. So here we are here, and by the way, this isn't just Ballistics. I'm showing you our data because I don't want to show you our clients' confidential data, but all of our clients use exactly the same basic workflow. So here's an ad on LinkedIn. We're huge fans of using LinkedIn, both for testing purposes and to generate sales opportunities. There's one of ours on someone's profile on LinkedIn. Okay. When people click on that ad, they click through to a landing page. Now, the landing page, 50% is hosted by WordPress, and it contains a form that's hosted by the lead management service we use, which is Aweber. Okay, hopefully people who visit will watch that video, and we'll go ahead and submit the form. By the way, it costs us about $5 per submission, and slightly over, but it's about 27% of people who visit the page subscribe to the form. So from there, you can calculate the cost per click. When you consider we're selling managed services, it's a very cost-effective way of advertising. Okay, and then probably 40% of our sales opportunities come organically, and a decent percentage of the rest come via LinkedIn. Now here we're looking at Aweber, so you can see a few screens here. On this screen, we're customizing the form that appears on the landing page. In this screen, we have a list of responses, and in this screen, we have the set of autoresponder messages that get sent to people so that's an insight into lead management. After the lead management piece is done, this data needs to be imported into CRM. Now you can see what we've done here is built a little tool. We built this tool in Excel. I'm a huge fan of using Excel as a rapid development environment. Excel is significantly more useful than just adding up columns of numbers. If you want to build a quick and dirty application to do something simple, Excel is a great way of doing it. Or if you're a Google Apps fan, then Google Sheets has similar, if not greater, capabilities. This application takes the export from Aweber, and it generates a set of CSV files that can then be imported into CRM. So there's one CSV file that contains contacts, another that contains accounts, another that contains opportunities, and it takes probably about 10 or 12 minutes to import them into CRM. So here they are here within vTiger, which is the tool that we use. We would import probably 10 or 15 opportunities a day into vTiger as a consequence of this workflow here from LinkedIn, sometimes more. Okay. Here's an insight into the reporting piece. We have our own web-based management information system, but this management information system evolved from Excel. In the first instance, I built it myself in Excel. And in fact, if you were to go back and look at the original Excel version of this management information system, it would be very difficult to tell the two apart. In fact, after 3 years of development of our web-based management information system, it's only just started to eclipse the power of the Excel one. So the reason I'm telling you that is I just want to make it clear how if you have some basic technology expertise, and I'm claiming that you should have, number one, you should have a founder or a leader who's not a Luddite, and number two, you should have some in-house capability paid for with all the money that you saved on software licenses. If you have those two things, then it's very easy to inexpensively replicate the workflow that we're talking about here by using open source tools, by using inexpensive web services, and by using Excel. Okay, and here we close the loop. We have a post on my blog. Even though I'm not a technologist, you know, I built and maintain the blog myself. It's so important to our organization, so critical, that even as the founder of the firm, it's something that I want to be intimately involved with. Everything else is done by other people, but I still look after this. That post, whenever a post is made on the blog, it automatically gets broadcast to the 30, 40,000 subscribers, as if by magic. So that's how we use technology, and this final slide gives you an idea of what it costs to have a solution like this. Now, let me contrast this by pointing out that a typical organization that we would work with, if we're talking about sales and marketing related technology, would probably have spent $50,000 to $200,000 on software licenses for the applications that they're running, and would probably spend between $2,000 and $5,000 a month on the maintenance of all that. When you take into account the money that they're spending with VARs for customization, the cost of internal people, the cost of patches and fixes and upgrades and so on. Let's look at what we're spending here. vTiger costs nothing. Okay, we're assuming it costs us $20 a month to host it. The reality is we host it ourselves, so the cost is actually minimal. Aweber, nothing to purchase, $29 a month. Now the reality is we can get that done by dumping the data out of Aweber. We've been careless. We should be deleting the data as we transfer it to CRM. If we did that, that would probably drop to $19 a month. WordPress cost us nothing. And again, we'll assume $20 a month for hosting. PHP List is the broadcast email tool that we use. Because we have a large list, we use that tool to do the broadcast. Again, open source, cost us nothing to purchase. We'll assume $20 a month to host. SendGrid is the SMTP service that we use to handle the broadcast email to avoid our internal SMTP getting blacklisted. That costs us $10 a month. And then other outsourced services, we probably spend about $200 a month. Now, we do have a development team in India, but if you look at just the development that we're doing on our own internal applications, like vTiger, as opposed to our web service, and if we include the system administration, so the people we pay to load new applications and to maintain the existing ones and to maintain our Linux servers, we're talking about $200 a month. That might be a little on the cheap side, maybe $300 a month. But you can see that the total cost is a fraction of what organizations would typically spend, and I wouldn't mind betting that we're significantly more agile than a typical organization that's spent 100 times this much. Okay, so that is the final slide. Let me just recap by saying I hope I've managed to broaden your horizons a little where technology is concerned. I hope I've managed to help you understand why CRM hasn't delivered on its promises, to recognize that the source of the problem is not CRM itself, but rather the traditional approach to the design of the sales function. I hope I've inspired you to look into redesigning your sales function a little bit closely. And I hope that I've also inspired you with what can be done with technology very cost effectively if you have a sensible approach to technology. So remember this offer here of a 40-minute best practice briefing. I'll put the poll up here, so if you haven't responded, you can. And I'll stay online for a minute or two if you want to ask any questions in the chat window here. I hope this webinar has been beneficial, and all the best with the application of these ideas.